So if you've used Omega 3 before in the past, we're going to go to Appearance, and then Settings on the theme that you're using. We're using this Level Up Omega theme, and we're going to click Settings here, and this might look a little familiar, but then it's going to get really unfamiliar quickly, because in Omega 3, we had various regions. You got to set your breakpoints, and basically you assigned your regions to a grid within this appearance menu. And that is now gone from Omega 4, and now everything having to do with your grid is going to be through your CSS, particularly through SAS extensions called Singularity, which is a grid framework, and breakpoints, which determines your breakpoints. So those two combined are going to be determining your grid, and of course we're going to be going over all there is to know about those within this series as well. So don't freak out if you don't know how to do any of that stuff, because we're going to show you, and it's really not hard. It's very logical in the way that it's set up, and you just need an introduction. Once you have that, you'll be flying. So the first thing you're going to notice about this appearance screen is that we start off with the Layouts tab. And now layouts are new to Omega 4, and what layouts are is they're a way to create predefined templates and layouts within PHP and CSS that you define, and you can even say what regions are showing up and blah blah blah, and then you can enable them per a particular page or your entire site. So right now we have layouts turned completely off, but if we enabled this layouts extension and picked one of the default layouts here, let's pick the hero, and let's save this. Now let's go to our site here, and you can see we automatically have this layout, and it's going to be responsive and everything, because that of course is how this particular layout was built. You can see it responds down to mobile, comes back up, and we have, you know, spaces for navigation, header, and this is a layout that's cooked in out of the box. And you may be thinking, well, that's cool, but I don't want to use, you know, this hero or this simple or this divine or off-canvas layouts. I don't want to use any of these, right? Well, luckily, it's really easy to build your own layouts. And usually, I'm going to say nearly all of the time, that's what I end up doing, mostly because I like to control my code that way. But if you don't, and you just want to have these layouts and your design fits these layouts, then these are great options. And you can take these, use the layout, and then just start styling on top of that. And if you're wondering, you know, what happens if my page has a different layout on a different page, then you're in luck, because there's a context Omega module that is used in coordination with Omega 4, and you can actually change the layout based on certain parameters, like perhaps maybe on pages of a certain content type or pages of a certain path are going to be getting a particular layout. And we're going to go over those in the dedicated layout tutorials along with that context module and how to use that. So for now, I'm going to uncheck this enable layouts just so we can have it off. That way when we come back to this later, we're going to be starting fresh. Now the next tab is development, and this development extension can add a bunch of things for you, and so it gives you some options here, right? So if you check this, it's going to rebuild the theme registry on every single load. Now that's good for development. You're going to want to make sure this is unchecked if you're in production. In fact, you're probably going to want to just uncheck this development extensions entirely for when you're in production, because what it's going to do is add a bunch of stuff that's just going to slow your site down. So this is going to rebuild your theme registry on every reload, which is highly performative or highly non-performative, so just to be aware of that. This is also rebuilding the CSS and JS aggregates on every page load as well, and this is just so if you have aggregation activated while you're in development, it's going to rebuild them without having to clear the cache, which is a really nice thing for anybody who has used Drupal with those things aggregated, because you end up clearing the cache all the time to see your changes. Now this browser width indicator, this adds a small box to the bottom that basically just tells you the current width of your browser, and that's really nice for evaluating your breakpoints. Although if you have your Chrome developers tools docked to the right and you're resizing your page that way, depending on what version of Chrome you're on, it might tell you that page width anyways. So usually I just use Chrome's version of that. I know it says that in Canary. I'm not sure about the other versions of Chrome. But however, this is very useful if you do not have that option. Now, enable live reload is checked, and live reload essentially monitors your site for changes. So when you save a file, it compiles your CSS, it reloads your page automatically. So it triggers live-reload.js, and it's going to update your site instantly with the new changes and refresh it with whatever CSS changes you made. So that's a really nice thing to have when you're developing, because you can come to CSS, save your files, come back to your page, and the changes are already made, which is, you know, it just adds time off of your, or cuts off time off of your development process. And now these live reload settings, you shouldn't really have to touch these too much. In fact, we'll go over that if we even need to later on once we get live reloading. And this region demo mode, I usually check this if I'm working on a particular layout or something like that. But most of the time when I'm in development, I leave this unchecked. Now what this does is it adds these gray boxes with the region name right here. If you were to uncheck this box, they would go away and it would be just your theme as it would be presented to users on your site. Now, it is helpful to see when you're making your site responsive to see where these boxes and these content areas are going. So, of course, check that out. And you can even leave some of them on and some of them off. So you could go through and just check which ones you want to leave on. Or maybe you're working on the header, so you're going to uncheck this and leave the rest of them on. Now, let's scroll back up here. Next, we have the compatibility menu, which really just has some compatibility extensions. It gives you conditional classes for Internet Explorer. It gives you things like Apple Touch icons, which also work on Android. So when you create the bookmark as a shortcut on your homepage, it has a nice looking icon. Now, one thing to note is that the default is going to be an Omega logo. So if you want to have your logo or whatever icon you're going to be using here, you want to make sure that you edit that icon, and we'll go over that as well and how and where you can do that and what sizes you need, because you need several different sizes of images. Now, the clear type support for Windows, handheld friendly, mobile optimized, viewport settings. You know, to be honest, I'm going to say that unless you have a special circumstance, you're probably going to leave most of these things checked, because they're usually just going to be helping you out. In fact, default scale, user scalable, yes. You know, I feel like you're going to want all of these things so that your website looks best on mobile devices, and it's going to be looking its most accurate to what you think it should look like. And now, Chrome Frame is pretty cool. Basically, it allows you to harness the power of Chrome's engine with Internet Explorer by prompting the user to install some software on their computer. This gets around basically the situation where people can't upgrade their browser, and maybe they add a little extension on that makes the website look a little bit better. Now, you can come down here and click this Enable Chrome Frame pop-up that's going to pop up and say, hey, install Chrome Frame, or you can have it display a warning for users that don't have Chrome Frame installed. You know, some of these things can be a little bit annoying for users, so it's up to you. It depends on how many Internet Explorer users you have. Now, the next thing we have here is the assets. And now, the assets extension, keep in mind you can uncheck any of these things globally here. So if you're not using this, just uncheck it, right? And then it doesn't have to, you know, process this stuff. So here what we can do is move JS files to the footer. We can exclude CSS files. We can exclude JS files. And you'll see here that it basically says one file per line. The asterisk is a wildcard. Each path is relative to a module, theme, profile, or theme engine, or the MISC folder. So the best way to illustrate this is I have created a basic web form, okay? In the last video I said I didn't install any modules. Well, I hadn't. But in the meantime, I just quickly installed web form, and created a text box here. And you'll notice that this has some inline styles, right? I mean, not inline styles, it has some styles telling it to be inline. And this style comes from, this web form container inline, comes from webform.css. Now, this particular CSS file isn't really toxic. I'm just using this as an example here. But some modules come with CSS files that are just getting in the way, and you really would rather not have their CSS. So you could come into your theme here and say, using this wildcard character, any CSS file in the web form module, don't load. Now, when we save this, let's go ahead and actually save this right now. Sorry, let's save this. Now, let's refresh this, and you'll see now not only is this not in line, but if we inspect this, look at it, it's not getting any class or any CSS from web form because it's not loading that CSS file. It's excluding it. Okay, so back to assets. Let's scroll down here. I'm going to get rid of this too. And you can do the same with JavaScript files that you don't want loaded as well. Now let's go down to these polyfills. I really like that these polyfills are included because I usually add most of these polyfills to my projects anyways. It adds respond, which basically allows for media queries to work in IE 6 through 8. And it basically removes a lot of the headaches involved with trying to make your site not only responsive, but built for responsive and still work on older browsers. CSS3 Pi by Kenneth Clark makes IE 6 through 9 capable of rendering several of CSS3's decoration features. It's just going to make your site look nicer in IE 6 through 9 if you're using CSS3, which you probably are. And Selectivizer is basically a JavaScript utility that emulates CSS3 pseudo classes and attribute selectors 6 through 8. All you have to do is include the script. So, like usually, if you're using this stuff, just check the box. It's really not adding that much weight. And of course, because this is built in HTML5, if you want this site to look anything like a website in older versions of Internet Explorer, Safari 4, older versions of the iPhone browser, older versions of Firefox, you want this HTML5 shiv. You check this, and it basically lets those browsers read the elements that exist in HTML5 that didn't exist in older versions of HTML so that it renders correctly. Now, under options, you can have it be the default variant or from source. And it might be useful, it says, to include the source files instead of the minified versions, but to be honest, I never need to go inside of these files to look at anything anyways. So just including them as the default production version, minified version, is good enough for me. And now down here you're going to see the normal theme stuff. Toggle display, you can turn off any of this stuff, your logo, site name, site slogan, user pictures and comments. I usually check these off because I don't have user pictures, user verification status. Shortcut icon would be the favicon, main menu, secondary menu. I'm going to turn off the secondary menu. I usually like to build my own menus. And then front page content, you could also turn this off. Now, logo image settings, it's going to be using the default logo, but if we wanted to upload a logo, we could do that. So let's click this, and I'm going to choose a file and upload the Level Up Tuts logo. Okay, I have the Level Up Tuts logo. All I have to do is choose the file, and it will be uploaded. And the shortcut icon is going to be your favicon, and you could go ahead and use the default or uncheck this and upload a new one. And I'm going to click Save Configuration. I don't have a favicon ready, so I'm not going to worry about it. So here we have our logo, and not too much else has changed because we didn't change a whole lot. But you learned a lot about the appearance settings for Omega 4, and you are probably less shocked now that you've seen it and sort of know where things are. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about the files that came with Omega, and we're going to discuss what they do and why they're there. So as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tuts. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a comment in the video or hit us up at Twitter, Level Up Tuts. Let us know what you're thinking. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Bye.